The rain battered the city streets, a relentless gray curtain that blurred the neon lights into smears of color, as if the world itself were weeping. In the heart of the towering glass empire of Sterling Enterprises, Daniel Sterling sat alone in his corner office, the CEO's throne of polished mahogany and chrome, staring at a photograph of a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. His daughter, Lily, was the only light in a life that had grown cold, a life where success had come at the cost of everything else: his marriage, his friendships, his ability to feel anything beyond the weight of responsibility. Outside, the storm howled, but inside, Daniel's world was silent, save for the faint hum of the city below and the ache in his chest that never left. Tonight, like every night, he would pick up Lily from her after-school program, drive her home through the rain-soaked streets, and try to be the father she deserved, even though he felt like a fraud, a man who could command boardrooms but struggled to connect with the one person who mattered most. Little did he know that this stormy evening would unravel his carefully controlled world, sparked by a single, heart-wrenching question from his 6-year-old daughter that would force him to confront the man he had become. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of a child's heart to change everything, please hit that like button, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts for more stories that remind us what truly matters. Your support keeps these stories alive. Daniel Sterling was a name synonymous with success. At 38, he had built Sterling Enterprises from a fledgling startup into a multinational corporation, a beacon of innovation in a cutthroat world. His face graced the covers of business magazines, his name whispered in awe at industry galas. But behind the tailored suits and steely resolve was a man haunted by loss. 5 years ago, his wife, Emily, had walked out, unable to bear the long hours and the man who seemed to love his work more than his family. She left him with Lily, then barely a year old, and a void that no amount of wealth could fill. Daniel had thrown himself into his work, believing that providing for Lily, private schools, a sprawling penthouse, every toy she could ever want, was enough. But it wasn't. Lily's questions about her mother, her quiet moments staring out the window, and her gentle tugs on his sleeve for attention were reminders that he was failing her in ways that money couldn't fix. He loved her fiercely, but love, he had learned, was not enough without presence, without time, without the courage to face his own shortcomings. The rain was still falling when Daniel pulled his sleek black sedan into the parking lot of the community center where Lily's after-school program was held. The building was a modest contrast to his world of glass and steel, its faded brick walls and flickering sign a testament to underfunding and neglect. Inside, Lily was waiting, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her pink raincoat buttoned crookedly. She ran to him, her small arms wrapping around his legs, and for a moment, the weight of the day lifted. They drove through the city, the wipers slicing through the rain, Lily chattering about her day, her art project, a new friend, a song she'd learned. Daniel listened, nodding, but his mind was half on the emails piling up, the merger meeting tomorrow, the endless demands of a life he could never escape. It was then, at a red light near the edge of downtown, that Lily's voice cut through the hum of the engine, small but piercing. "Daddy, she looks hungry, can I share my food for her?" Daniel followed her gaze to the sidewalk, where a woman sat. Huddled beneath a tattered awning, her thin frame wrapped in a soaked jacket, her face half hidden by a hood. Beside her was a cardboard sign, its ink running in the rain, the words barely legible, "Anything helps." The woman's hands were clasped tightly, as if holding onto some last shred of dignity. Daniel's first instinct was to look away, to mutter something about safety or strangers, to keep driving. It was what he always did, kept the world at arm's length, safe behind the glass of his car, his office, his life. But Lily's eyes, wide and unclouded by the cynicism that had hardened him, held him captive. She was already rummaging in her backpack, pulling out the little plastic container of apple slices and crackers she hadn't eaten at school. "She needs it more than me," Lily said, her voice trembling with a conviction that made Daniel's throat tighten. He wanted to say no, to protect her from the harshness of the world, but something in her gaze, something pure, something he'd lost, stopped him. They pulled over, the rain drumming on the roof of the car as Lily rolled down her window. The woman looked up, startled, her eyes hollow but wary. Lily leaned out, her small hand clutching the container, and offered it with a smile that could have melted the storm itself. "Here," she said simply. The woman hesitated, then took the food, her fingers trembling as she murmured a quiet thank you. Daniel watched, frozen, as the exchange unfolded, a moment so small yet so profound it cracked something open inside him. Lily waved as they drove away, but Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his mind reeling. He saw himself in that woman, not in her circumstances, but in her isolation, her hunger for something more than survival. He realized, with a pang that felt like a physical wound, that he had been starving too, not for food but for connection, for meaning, for the courage to step beyond the walls he'd built. The next morning, Daniel couldn't shake the image of the woman or Lily's simple act of kindness. At the office, he was distracted, his usual sharpness dulled by a restless energy. The merger meeting loomed, a deal that could cement his legacy, but all he could think about was Lily's question, her unhesitating generosity. He found himself Googling local shelters, reading about homelessness in the city, the numbers staggering, thousands without a place to sleep, families torn apart, children not unlike Lily facing hunger and cold. It was a world he'd always known existed but had kept at a distance, a problem too big, too messy for a man like him to touch. Yet Lily had touched it, with nothing more than a handful of apple slices and a heart that refused to look away. Daniel's assistant noticed his distraction, asking if he was all right, but he brushed her off, unable to articulate the storm inside him. That evening, when he picked up Lily, he asked her why she'd wanted to give her food away. She looked at him, her brow furrowed as if the answer were obvious. Because she was sad, Daddy. And I didn't want her to be. Those words haunted him. Over the next few days, Daniel found himself driving past that same corner, looking for the woman, but she was never there. He didn't know her name, her story, but she had become a symbol of something he couldn't ignore. He started noticing things he'd never seen before, the man sleeping in the doorway of a shuttered store, the family pushing a cart piled with their belongings, the tired faces in the soup kitchen line he passed on his way to work. Each sighting chipped away at the armor he'd worn for years, the belief that his responsibility ended with his daughter and his company. He began to research, to learn, to ask questions he'd never dared to ask. Why were so many people slipping through the cracks in a city as wealthy as his? What could one person, even a CEO with resources, do to make a difference? The answers were overwhelming, but Lily's example was a beacon, guiding him towards something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Daniel's first step was small but deliberate. He reached out to a local nonprofit that ran shelters and food programs, offering to fund a meal distribution event. The organizer, a no-nonsense woman named Clara, was skeptical of his motives, another rich man looking for a tax write-off, she assumed, but she accepted his offer. Daniel threw himself into the project, not just with money but with time, something he'd always guarded jealously. He brought Lily along to the planning meetings, watching as she colored in the corner or chatted with Clara's team, her presence a reminder of why he was doing this. The event was held on a crisp Saturday morning at a community center not unlike the one Lily attended, a place where families gathered, some with weary eyes but others with cautious hope. Daniel worked the serving line, ladling soup into bowls, his hands clumsy at first but growing steadier as the day went on. Lily was there too, passing out rolls with a smile, her small voice calling out to each person as if they were a friend. Daniel watched her, his heart swelling and breaking at once, realizing how much he had to learn from his own daughter. The day wasn't perfect. There were logistical hiccups, long lines, and moments when Daniel felt out of his depth, a fish out of water among people whose struggles he could barely comprehend. But there were also moments of connection, a man who thanked him with tears in his eyes, a child who hugged Lily after she gave him an extra cookie, a woman who told Daniel she hadn't eaten a hot meal in days. These were the moments that stayed with him, that made the world feel both bigger and smaller, more broken yet more mendable. Clara, initially wary, began to soften, seeing in Daniel not just a benefactor but a man grappling with his own limitations. She challenged him to do more, to think beyond one-off events, to use his influence to advocate for systemic change. It was a daunting prospect, but for the first time, Daniel didn't shy away. He was starting to see that his wealth, his position, could be more than a shield, it could be a tool. As weeks turned into months, Daniel's life began to shift. He restructured his schedule, delegating more at work to carve out time for Lily and for the causes that were beginning to define him. He started a foundation under Sterling Enterprises, focused on addressing food insecurity and homelessness, hiring experts like Clara to guide its mission. He faced resistance, board members who questioned the diversion of resources, colleagues who saw his newfound passion as a midlife crisis, even his own doubts about whether he was doing enough, or doing it right. But Lily was his anchor, her unwavering belief in kindness a reminder that even small acts could ripple outward. One evening, as they sat together at their kitchen table, Lily drawing a picture of the soup kitchen day, she looked up at him and said, "I'm proud of you, Daddy." Those words, so simple, so unfiltered, were a balm to wounds he hadn't even known he carried. He pulled her into a hug, tears pricking his eyes, and promised himself he would keep going, not just for her but for the man he wanted to become. The rain had stopped, replaced by a clear, starlit sky, when Daniel found himself back at that same corner where it all began. The woman was there again, her sign a little less faded, her face a little less gaunt. He parked, his heart pounding, and approached her, Lily's hand in his. He didn't know what he would say, only that he needed to try. He knelt beside her, offering a warm coffee and a sandwich, and asked her name. "Maria," she said softly, her eyes meeting his with a mix of gratitude and caution. They talked, not for long, but long enough for Daniel to see her not as a symbol but as a person, with a story as complex and human as his own. He gave her the number of Clara's organization, promising to check in, knowing it was only a start. As he and Lily walked back to the car, she squeezed his hand and said, "See, Daddy. We can help." And in that moment, under the vast, quiet sky, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. This story, born from a little girl's compassion and a father's awakening, is a reminder that change begins with a single act, a single heart willing to see the world differently. If Lily and Daniel's journey touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a spark of hope, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts for more stories that celebrate the power of kindness. And before we end, I have a special request. In the comments below, share a moment when a small act of kindness changed your day, or someone else's. Your stories inspire us all.